And now I'm really excited to introduce our next guest. When we talk about advocacy, we hear a lot about sharing petitions, making meetings with elected officials, but there are various ways of raising your voice. And one way can be art. So next up, we have Katie from the UK, who is using her art to advocate for people living with diabetes. Welcome, Katie.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. And what an amazing talk to be following.
Absolutely. But I know this one will be just as amazing as well. So you use art to advocate for people with diabetes. Tell us how you started with that. How did that happen?
So when I was in my kind of later teenage years, I was really struggling with my mental health, emotional well-being towards diabetes. And in this really intense period of burnout. And I was really struggling to communicate this with my diabetes team. They wanted to listen to me, but I just couldn't quite articulate what was kind of going on with my diabetes. And so I realized that one thing I could do is that I could make a picture. I could paint what I was feeling. And so I sat down and I made this painting and I took it to my clinic and I said, this is it. This is how I'm feeling right now. And this is how diabetes is going for me. And this was this first way of really advocating for myself in diabetes spaces through artwork. And it opened up all these conversations that hadn't been taking place before. And I maybe hadn't even realized myself that these conversations needed to happen. And it just kind of started this series of events of using art to advocate for both myself in these spaces and then the wider diabetes community as that has grown.
Incredible. And I can so relate to that. Sometimes it's really hard to find the right words, and it's beautiful that you have another tool using your art to communicate your feelings. And I know that you brought this picture with you because I think with that introduction, everyone wants to see it now. And you have a few more pictures. So I'm going to leave the stage to you, and you're going to walk us through your beautiful art.
Thank you so much.
The stage is yours.
So this was the first painting that I really created that I've just mentioned. So this was actually taken from my clinic. It was kind of shared around the clinic and started opening up these conversations about myself and then about other young people within the hospital. And then it was taken to an event with Diabetes UK, who were trying to put together some prototypes for young people transitioning from pediatric to adult services. And it was taken to this event and it started these conversations again. And they realized that these conversations had not really been taken place, even though they were so important. And they were asking really why were young people not engaging with these services and why were they not engaging with these prototypes? And this painting started these conversations about making sure that we really think about this different perspective and about how young people are feeling with their diabetes. And so I attended this event and I went and spoke about this painting and I helped them try to make sure that young people's voices were involved in their care. But it really, I was 17 at the time, and it really started this kind of thought process in my mind about what other spaces were talking about us without us, and how many spaces were really failing to listen to the voices of young people. And then also that question of how could I start to use artwork more frequently in advocating for both myself and other people with diabetes. And I was really interested in this question about where creativity could start to fit in. So this was my next piece of artwork that kind of got out there into the community. I entered the competition to illustrate the National Pediatric Diabetes Audit in 2019. And the question that I was asked was, what does a good day in clinic look like to you? And this was a huge question, and I sat there for absolutely ages thinking about how I would answer this question. And I realized really it was less about the numbers, it was less about what popped up on the screen about my HbA1c, and it was more the feeling when I left clinic that my healthcare professionals were standing beside me, that they were supporting me, and that I was at the center of my care, that they were surrounding me and empowering me in my diabetes. And so that's what I tried to capture on this. I illustrated my DSN and my dietitian, who were kind of key members of my team at that point, and made sure that was something that could be reflected within the audit as well. So I then, having advocated in this way by making this artwork, I was then became part of the National Diabetes Audit for the Adolescent and Young Adult Audit and the research steering groups, and really tried to make sure that what I was creating in my artwork was then reflected in the numbers and that I could advocate in those very professional spaces and these research-based spaces using artwork and making sure that what the recommendations that young people needed to be in these audits could be reflected in a different way. And then this year, for Hypo Awareness Week, I was thinking about how we try and describe hypos, and there's really the impossibility of capturing such an abstract part of diabetes, the way that it's so difficult to put into words how it feels to have a low blood sugar. And so I thought, what better way than to use a tool that is equally as abstract, and to take art and make sure that we can start to communicate what it's like to have these low blood sugars. And so these were two paintings, because I found that trying to sum it up in one painting was just impossible. And I realized that I had two different kinds of hypos, these really intense red traumatic ones, and these much slower ones where everything kind of slows down and it feels like my head is in this kind of bubble situation. And even though I've spent a lot of time thinking about myself, how I would put hypos into painting, when I shared these on social media, the thing that I really enjoyed the most was hearing other people's reflections of these paintings, and the way other people could draw things out of these images that I hadn't even considered, and see parts of their lived experience reflected in these paintings that I had never really understood myself. And I think these conversations that are taking place between other people with diabetes, and then professionals and researchers, and all of these things that were coming together based on conversations that were started through these artworks, was really, really special to me, and something that I thought was a really incredible tool that we could start to broach this barrier in communication about diabetes, that's something that's so abstract. But my social media advocacy has mainly been around these digital drawings. This is what I produced most of the time. So I really wanted to start creating something that was really positive and uplifting, because I know that some of these early ones are a little bit more heavy. And so I started making portraits of people with diabetes. These are all portraits, self-portraits, but taking portraits of other people with diabetes to kind of share these really empowering messages. They had quotes alongside them, to try and make sure that we're all, showing off our technology if we want to, and we're celebrating these parts of diabetes that we don't always see celebrated, and that we can do that through art. That's a completely different way of communicating these things. And then these messages around small progress is still progress, that I think are really important to get out there as part of the diabetes community.
Okay, you see yourself that you have so many fans out there, and they're loving this possibility to hear the backstory of these paintings. And I know that a certain someone, and probably a lot of people in the audience, especially love the one, "Don't call me non-compliant or uncontrolled."
Mm-hmm.
You know that we care deeply about the language that we use when talking about diabetes. And this one is so striking as well. Thank you so much for sharing all of that and bringing these images with you. One of the comments said, "A picture says more than 1,000 words," and I couldn't agree more. Is there one last thing that you want to tell aspiring artists or just people living with diabetes in this community?
Yeah, so I think something I get quite a bit is that I can't make artwork because I'm not an artist. And I think actually, no, everyone can make art. Everyone can have these creative spaces, no matter if you're creating masterpieces or if you're just taking time to reflect on your own diabetes in a different way, or advocating for people with diabetes in a slightly different way. I think this is something that everyone can have a go at, and that I really encourage everyone to try, just taking a moment and exploring your own diabetes, or how you can advocate for diabetes in a different way. And healthcare professionals, how can you integrate this into your care, and how can you have these conversations in a slightly different way? I think this is for everyone.
Beautiful advice. Thank you so, so much. I know a lot of people will be inspired by that. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.